Good morning.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night.
Good morning. Trump's actually going to win this thing. I'm so pissed off.
Good morning. Good morning.
The bigotry and hatred.
I might wake up a motherfucking slave.
We're scared for our lives. We're scared for our friends.
I hate this dumbass who can't shut his little pie hole. Oh.
Who the f is voting for him? You. How f***ing dare you?
We are. I chose family. I chose women. I chose America.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with you.
This will break right. It'll be like a really bad dream, and none of this will ever happen.
Wrong.
I might wake up a motherfucking slave.
The right to life is in the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Nowhere is there a right to abortion. So the judges usurped their role as protectors of the Constitution when they created a right that was never intended to be in the Constitution.
There's nothing in the Constitution that says the Supreme Court has the right to make laws on everything. That's what you got legislature for.
Judges on the Supreme Court and at many levels of the judiciary have become corrupted by the power to interpret the Constitution. They now believe, and they have admitted in their judicial opinions, that the Constitution means what they say it means, and they can mean whatever they want it to mean.
The candid citizen must confess that if the policy of the government upon vital questions affecting the whole people is to be irrevocably fixed by decisions of the Supreme Court, the people will have ceased to be their own rulers, having to that extent practically resigned their government into the hands of that eminent tribunal. Well, that was Abraham Lincoln on the occasion of his first inaugural address. He basically said, well, hey, if the Supreme Court's the final arbiter of what the Constitution says, then we have ceased to be our own rulers, and the Supreme Court is our ruler.
A predictable outcome that has developed from this fabricated right can be seen in one segment of our society. If abortion continues and the prevailing trend persists, the African American community will see a sharper decline in population, as we are no longer at the 2.1 replacement rate necessary to maintain a stable population. In time, our distinctive population will become politically irrelevant. All we have fought for and achieved to this point in our history will have been for nothing but a brief moment when we did make a difference and did have a say on the American political stage. Silenced at the hands of abortionists.
In the United States, since Roe v. Wade, about 10% of the white race has been wiped out by abortion. 28% of the black race has been wiped out by abortion.
For every 5 African-American women that get pregnant, 3 choose to abort. Every day, 1,452 African-American children, just under 4,000 overall, are killed in the womb by abortion. African Americans make up 12% of the population, but basically 36% of all abortions. So we are disproportionately affected by abortions.
And the racist aspect of it, yes, it's very clear. They're having abortions at twice the rate of the rest of American society. That doesn't happen accidentally. Abortion happens when people are targeted.
After 35 years of abortion, we have lost 14 million lives.
We only make up 25% of all of their other services, with almost 45% of the abortions they perform.
Each woman has to have 2.1 children to maintain a stable population in a developed country like the United States. For the first time in 2003, the black population went under 2.1 replacement, where the next few years the black population will actually begin to decline.
As a black American, I know that most folks rank slavery as the worst thing that ever happened to America. But by virtue of the fact that I'm alive and here today, abortion most certainly would not have allowed me that privilege. So I say that abortion is the worst thing that has ever happened to America.
Many people consider slavery to be the most heinous act that the United States government has ever condoned. And yet, there are others who know that even those Africans who were brought over on those slave ships and lost their lives, maybe 1 or 2 million, certainly are just a part of a serious act of oppression that still continues today. In America, since Roe versus Wade, 14 million African American babies have been added to the number of those who have been oppressed because either of skin color and now gestational age.
I think the greatest failure in reference to the abortion issue has been black leadership. I'm terribly, terribly, terribly concerned that the black church, our black congressional representatives, and our social organizations such as the NAACP have been deathly silent on this issue. And if silence is consent, then we have this horrific reality that black leadership is helping to perpetrate the genocide of their own people.
Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Planned Parenthood of Georgia, strategically located in the heart of the Georgia State University community. All around you, you see the student buildings and young students walking back and forth in the community. People often wonder why young people and even children are having sex earlier and earlier. Well, it's not so hard to figure out. You have Planned Parenthood in the middle of your college communities, not far from your high schools, and young people walking back and forth. They can walk right in and get free birth control or very low-priced birth control and free condoms. And when the condoms don't work and when the birth control fails, they can go right back and get an abortion.
20 years after Roe v. Wade, that for 20 years people have organized their personal lives around the availability of abortion as a backup when contraception fails.
Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest distributors of birth control devices, but these birth control devices fail 2 million times a year in the United States. And so what we see, according to the Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is a research arm of Planned Parenthood, is that nearly 2 out of 3 women obtaining abortions were using contraception when they got pregnant. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling, wonderful way to sell a product, then have the product fail, and then offer people abortions to cover up for the failure of your own product that you just sold them.
We had a whole plan that sold abortions, and it was called sex education. Break down their natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values, and become the sex expert in their life so they turn to us when we would give them a low-dose birth control pill they would get pregnant on or a defective condom, because we didn't buy the most expensive condoms, we bought the cheapest condoms. Our goal was 3 to 5 abortions from every girl between the ages of 13 and 18.
They get the children young, they get them sexually active. They say if they can only get a girl about at 16 to have an abortion, they got her for 3 or 4 more because she'll remain sexually active. They give them contraceptives. They get the cheapest brand of everything, and yet they put on this front that they're helpful, and they got everybody fooled.
We gave them a low-dose birth control pill that in order to provide any level of activity had to be taken at the same time every single day. The girl wouldn't take it accurately, and if you miss that thing, the protection is out of her system. The sexual activity goes from 0 or once a week to 5 to 7 times a week. She doesn't take the pill properly. She gets pregnant. And who does she call when she's pregnant? She calls us. We're the experts. And we were ready. We used a script designed to overcome every single objection. That's what sales is. Overcome the objection and you get the order, in this case, the abortion. And when she calls, the first question is reassure. And so the girl confesses, I think I may be pregnant. And the counselor, who's really a telemarketer, that's all they're trained to do, sell over the telephone, but we call them counselors, says, we can take care of your problem. No one needs to know. And then the first question, what's the first day of your last normal period? And she gives this so-called counselor the date, and she says you're 8 weeks pregnant. She didn't say you might be 8 weeks pregnant. She didn't say you could be. She said you are 8 weeks pregnant. So she has planted the first seed in this long marketing thread. And the sad thing is, in this girl's mind, she is the expert. This is the pregnancy expert. And the next question is this good news or bad news? If it were good news, she would not be calling an abortion clinic. It's bad news. And when she replies bad news, this counselor moves right in because now she wants to identify the fear, to use it to to reaffirm that abortion decision anytime that girl moves away. And if she says, well, maybe I need to think about this, your parents will kill you, you'll have to miss drill team, the abortion is settled.
What's in a name? Sometimes people wonder why Margaret Sanger chose the name Planned Parenthood for her organization. Initially, Planned Parenthood was called the Birth Control League. People thought the word control was too intimidating, too threatening. And so they said, let's make it sound like something nice, Planned Parenthood. So when people look for us, they think we want to help them plan something that's good for them. So therefore, we have the name Planned Parenthood. How deceptive. Planned Parenthood helps people through the influence of Margaret Sanger, its founder, to sterilize people, to abort babies, to murder babies, and to hurt women. Planned Parenthood performs the lion's share of abortions in America, all under the name of something that sounds so helpful, Planned Parenthood.
Margaret Sanger said that she wanted to rid the world of human weeds, and the Nazis said exactly the same thing, life unworthy of life. She was a racist and eugenicist, and the purpose of her organization, which was originally called the American Birth Control League, was summed up by one of its mastheads on the Birth Control Review, which was to breed a race of thoroughbreds. Another one of the mastheads was, birth control, a sure light in our racial darkness. One of the people who sat on her board, one of her most trusted advisors, was Lothrop Stoddard, who wrote a book in 1922 called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. And in it, he said that crossings with the Negro are always fatal.
Margaret Sanger, when she started the American Birth Control League and later Planned Parenthood, had an agenda, a eugenic agenda, to quote-unquote get rid of the inferior races.
Planned Parenthood today refuses to admit that Margaret Sanger is a racist.
We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out the idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Margaret Sanger.
While no direct link has been established between Margaret Sanger and Adolf Hitler, there are enough Nazi connections to see that their thinking was in line with each other and that they shared many of the same twisted ideals.
This is little known, but in the United States, forced sterilization of minority women only stopped in 1972. Several 100,000 minority women were forcibly sterilized against their will under the Buck v. Bell Supreme Court decision of 1929, where one of the Supreme Court justices said famously, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough.
The Negro Project was specifically aimed at having people go throughout the South and convince the Negroes not to have children.
Margaret Sanger was deeply involved in eugenics in the United States. Hearts of the ideas that the Nazis came up with were generated by U.S. and British eugenicists.
In Margaret Sanger's premier publication, which was called the Birth Control Review, they ran articles written by doctors of the Third Reich. We also know that in Nazi Germany there was a Dr. Hans Harmsen who was writing all of the sterilization laws for the Third Reich. And that after World War II, Hans Harmsen was part of the group that started the German affiliate of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. So there are a lot of connections between the atrocities that went on in Nazi Germany and Planned Parenthood.
Although forced sterilizations of black women ended in 1972, the eugenics movement continued with the striking down of state laws in 1973 with the onset of Roe v. Wade. While the method had changed, the outcome was still in place. But now, eugenicists would be able to continue to kill babies and hurt women on a massive scale. With the targeting of minority communities and encouraging abortions at a high enough rate, they could ensure a decline in the population of those that Margaret Sanger considered to be weeds.
Planned Parenthood is nothing more than a shell for the eugenics campaign that began a couple hundred years ago.
This whole Holocaust in the African American community is based on racism by Planned Parenthood.
Most people are familiar with Roe, the case that made abortion possible through the first trimester. It was the case of Doe versus Bolton centered about Sandra Cano that made abortion possible through all 3 trimesters. This decision made it possible to kill a fully viable human being up until the very day of birth.
Most people think abortion is legal only to 3 months of pregnancy in the United States, whereas we all know, those of us who are in the business know that this is legal for all 9 months of pregnancy until the very day of birth.
Now, abortions are done through all 9 months of pregnancy, not because of Roe v. Wade, but because of Doe v. Bolte that said for the health of the mother, an abortion can be completed through all 9 months of pregnancy. But the problem was that health was defined as mental health. And we would say to this scared young woman, you would have problems with this pregnancy should you carry it to term, wouldn't you? She'd say yes, and we'd chart it emotional health.
Over 60% of the people didn't believe that abortions took place past 20 weeks. Unfortunately, abortion has been decriminalized all the way through the moment of birth.
Once the protections of life were removed from all 9 months of pregnancy, Planned Parenthood accelerated their eugenic agenda by placing a majority of their now legal abortion clinics in minority neighborhoods.
Planned Parenthood Federation of America locates most of its abortion clinics in minority neighborhoods. Planned Parenthood does most of its abortions on minority women.
Knowing they could not get the approval of the people, nor of the legislatures of most of the states, nor Congress, those seeking to legalize abortion armed themselves with lies and false statistics. Bypassing the lawmaking branch of the government, they took their contrived evidence to the courts.
In NARAL, we generally emphasize the drama of the individual case, not the mass statistics. But when we spoke of the latter, it was always 5,000 to 10,000 deaths a year. I confess that I knew the figures were totally false, and I suppose the others did too. Dr. Bernard Nathanson, co-founder of NARAL.
The true numbers were, before abortion was legalized, about 40 to 70 women died every year of abortions in the United States. Now, the trouble here is that those were all very heavily publicized. After Roe v. Wade, they're covered up. So we think that the number of 50 to 100 women being killed by so-called safe and legal abortion is probably still accurate in the United States.
Those seeking to end laws protecting the unborn found the perfect pawns to take the fall in their deadly crusade. Sharp, articulate, well-educated women were driven to prey on their vulnerable sisters, manipulating them into thinking their support for abortion would make their lives significantly better.